Have you ever noticed something almost unsettling? The moment you stop chasing, they start wondering. The moment you stop explaining, they begin paying attention. And the moment you stop needing their approval, they quietly ask themselves what changed. It's one of the strangest truths about human psychology. As long as people know they have your constant attention, they rarely stop to question your value. Your presence becomes predictable, your effort becomes expected, and your kindness slowly fades into the background like something that will always be there. But the instant you reclaim your energy, not out of anger, not to play games, but because you've finally chosen your own peace, something shifts. The silence you've created speaks louder than all the words you once used to prove yourself. People begin to notice your absence. They begin to question your change. And sometimes they begin to question themselves. Hello everyone, welcome to the Magnetic Masculinity channel. In this video, we'll explore why people often become uncertain the moment you stop seeking their attention, what this reveals about human nature, and how letting go of the need to be noticed may become the most powerful decision you ever make. Now let's get started. Part 1. The attention they never appreciated becomes the attention they can no longer find. There is a quiet irony in human nature. People often don't realize the value of something while it is constantly available. Not because they are cruel, but because the human mind quickly adapts to what it receives every day. What was once appreciated slowly becomes expected. What was once a gift quietly turns into routine. The same thing happens with attention. When you are always the first to text, always the one checking in, always making the effort to keep the connection alive, your presence slowly becomes part of the background. Not because you have become less valuable, but because your consistency is mistaken for permanence. You begin believing that if you simply care a little more, try a little harder, or become a little more understanding, things will eventually change. But often they don't. Because attention that is constantly given without boundaries can lose its emotional weight. Then one day, something inside you changes. Not because you are trying to punish anyone, not because you suddenly stop caring, but because you become tired of measuring your worth by someone else's response. You stop sending messages just to keep the conversation alive. You stop explaining yourself every time someone misunderstands you. You stop asking for the smallest pieces of attention that should have been freely given in the first place. And for the first time in a long while, your energy returns to you. That is the moment everything begins to feel different. The silence you create is not empty. It is filled with self-respect. It tells the world that your kindness is no longer unlimited, your peace is no longer negotiable, and your value is no longer dependent on being constantly noticed. Ironically, this is often when people begin to wonder. They notice the absence of the effort they once overlooked. They realize the conversations feel different. They begin asking themselves why your warmth no longer arrives on demand. Not because you became colder, but because you finally stopped pouring from an empty cup. And perhaps the greatest lesson is this. The moment you stop chasing recognition is often the moment you begin recognizing your own worth. Once that happens, you no longer give your attention away to be appreciated. You offer it as a gift, freely, intentionally, and only where it is truly valued. Part 2. Your absence forces questions. That your presence never could. There is something fascinating about the human mind. It often ignores what is always there, yet becomes deeply curious the moment it disappears. As long as your attention is guaranteed, there is no reason to question it. No reason to wonder if it might one day be gone. People naturally become comfortable with certainty, and comfort has a way of making us overlook the very things that quietly enrich our lives. But certainty ends the moment you stop making yourself predictable. Not through manipulation, not through silence designed to provoke a reaction, but because you have finally stopped living with the constant need to be noticed. That difference changes everything. When your messages become less frequent because you are genuinely focused on your own life, people notice. When you stop explaining every decision because you are comfortable with being misunderstood by those unwilling to understand, people notice. When you no longer seek reassurance before making choices that align with your values, people notice. And with that change comes something unexpected. Questions. Why has he changed? Is he no longer interested? Has he found something or someone more important? Yet the most important question is rarely the one they ask about you. It is the one they begin asking about themselves. Did I take him for granted? Did I assume he would always be here? Did I mistake his kindness for permanence? These questions rarely appear while you are constantly available. They emerge only when your absence creates space for reflection. This is one of the quiet truths about human relationships. Constant effort often goes unnoticed. Its absence is what reveals its value. That does not mean you should withdraw to make someone anxious. A relationship built on uncertainty and emotional games cannot become healthy through more uncertainty. Instead, let your absence be honest. Let it come from growth, not resentment, from purpose, not pride, from self-respect, not revenge. Because when your life becomes full of meaningful work, genuine friendships, personal discipline, and inner peace, you naturally stop chasing the reassurance that once consumed your thoughts. And whether someone begins to question your absence becomes secondary. The real transformation is that you no longer question your own worth every time someone fails to notice your effort. You have learned something far more valuable. The people who truly belong in your life will not need your constant presence to remember your value. They will recognize it because they respect the person you are, even when you are not standing in front of them. Before we continue, pause for a moment and ask yourself this. How much of your life have you spent trying to be remembered by people who barely noticed everything you gave? If this message is opening your eyes, subscribe to the channel and join a community of people who are choosing self-respect over seeking approval, inner peace over emotional exhaustion, and genuine confidence over constant validation. Always remember this. The people who truly value you won't need a constant reminder that you exist. Now let's continue, because the next lesson may reveal why your silence often says more than all the attention you once gave away. Part 3. The day you stop reacting is the day they lose their certainty. One of the greatest sources of power is not found in the controlling other people. It is found in controlling yourself. Many people spend years reacting to everything around them. A delayed message changes their mood. A cold reply keeps them awake at night. A single moment of distance sends them searching for answers that may not even exist. Without realizing it, they hand over control of their emotions to someone else. And once another person controls your emotional state, they unknowingly control your peace. But there comes a moment when something inside you becomes stronger than your fear of losing someone's attention. You stop reacting immediately, not because you no longer have feelings, but because you've learned that not every silence deserves a response. Not every misunderstanding requires an explanation, and not every emotional wave deserves your energy. That quiet restraint is transformative. The version of you that once rushed to fix every uncomfortable moment begins to disappear. In his place stands someone calmer, someone who listens more than he speaks, someone who is no longer afraid of temporary distance because he understands that genuine relationships are not destroyed by a little space. And that is where certainty begins to shift. People who were accustomed to your immediate reactions suddenly find themselves without the response they expected. They expected you to chase. You remained still. They expected you to defend yourself. You chose peace instead. They expected your attention to be available on demand. Instead, they discovered that your attention now follows your values, not your emotions. That change can feel confusing to those who only knew the old version of you. For the first time, they are forced to face something they never had to consider before. The possibility that your life no longer revolves around their opinion. And that realization often creates uncertainty, not because you intended to make them question themselves, but because people naturally notice when someone who once depended on external validation begins living from internal conviction. The greatest irony is that your silence is no longer asking for recognition. It is expressing freedom. Freedom from the need to explain. Freedom from the need to be understood by everyone. Freedom from the exhausting habit of proving your worth over and over again. When you reach that point, something remarkable happens. Whether they begin to doubt, wonder, or reach out becomes far less important than the peace you've gained by no longer reacting to every shift in their behavior. Because the strongest person is not the one who always gets the last word. It is the one who no longer needs to. That is the quiet strength that changes not only how others see you, but how you finally see yourself. Part 4. When you choose yourself, they begin to see what they could lose. There is a moment in every person's life when they face a difficult decision. Do I keep chasing someone else's attention? Or do I finally start building a life that doesn't depend on it? Most people postpone that decision for years. They keep waiting for one more message, one more apology, one more sign that all their effort will eventually be returned. They convince themselves that if they love a little harder, stay a little longer, or sacrifice a little more, everything will finally fall into place. But life has a quiet way of teaching the same lesson over and over. Anything that requires you to abandon yourself is asking for too much. The day you stop making another person's approval the center of your world is the day your own life begins to grow again. You rediscover mornings that belong to your goals instead of your anxieties. You find yourself laughing without checking your phone. You make decisions because they align with your values, not because you're afraid of someone's reaction. Your confidence stops depending on how warmly you're treated that day. Instead, it comes from knowing that you are living honestly. That kind of transformation is impossible to hide. People notice when someone no longer carries the quiet desperation of needing to be chosen. Your conversations become calmer. Your smile becomes more genuine. Your silence no longer feels heavy because it isn't waiting for someone to break it. It is simply the silence of someone who is at peace. And peace has a remarkable presence. It doesn't compete. It doesn't chase. It doesn't demand attention. Yet somehow it draws people in. Perhaps this is why they begin to question your change. Not because you've become more distant, but because you've become more complete. For the first time, they see a version of you who is no longer negotiating your worth for a little affection or temporary reassurance. You are no longer trying to convince anyone that you deserve respect. You simply live as someone who already believes it, and whether they decide to step closer or continue walking away no longer determines the direction of your life. Because your future is no longer built around being someone's option, it is built around becoming your best self. Ironically, that is often the version of you people find hardest to forget. Not because you made them miss you, but because you finally stopped losing yourself just to keep them close. Part 5. The greatest change happens when you no longer need to be seen. In the end, the greatest transformation is not that they begin to doubt. It is that you finally stop doubting yourself. For years, you may have believed your value depended on how much attention you received. A quick reply made you feel important. A compliment gave you confidence. A moment of silence filled you with anxiety. Without realizing it, you allowed someone else's behavior to become the mirror through which you measured your own worth. But mirrors can lie. People are distracted. They have their own fears, struggles, and blind spots. Sometimes they fail to appreciate you, not because you lack value, but because they are too consumed by their own world to recognize what has always been standing in front of them. The mistake is believing that their inability to see your worth somehow erases it. It never did. The strongest people eventually understand a quiet truth. Your value exists long before anyone acknowledges it. Just as the sun remains the sun behind the clouds, your character does not disappear simply because someone fails to recognize it. That realization changes everything. You stop chasing conversations that have already ended. You stop forcing connections that no longer feel mutual. You stop exhausting yourself trying to be unforgettable to people who never truly pause long enough to know you. Instead, you begin investing in something far more permanent: your discipline, your peace, your integrity, your purpose. These are the things no one can take from you, and as they grow, your presence changes naturally. You walk into a room without needing to be noticed. You speak without needing to be validated. You leave without wondering who will miss you. That is freedom. Ironically, this is often when people begin to question what changed. They sense a quiet confidence that wasn't there before. Not because you've become emotionally unavailable, but because you've become emotionally independent. There is a profound difference. One pushes people away, the other simply refuses to abandon itself. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson of all. The moment you stop caring about controlling how others see you, you finally begin becoming the person you were always meant to be. Whether they begin to wonder, regret, or reach out is no longer the ending that matters. Because the true ending is this: you no longer wake up hoping someone else will choose you. You wake up choosing yourself every single day. And there is no greater victory than becoming the person who no longer needs another person's attention to believe in their own worth. Conclusion. The moment you stop caring about being constantly noticed is often the moment you begin to notice your own strength. True confidence is not built on someone else's attention. It is built on the quiet certainty that your value remains the same, whether people applaud you, ignore you, or misunderstand you. And once you find that kind of inner freedom, no amount of external validation can ever replace it. The lesson to remember. If there is one lesson to carry with you after this video, let it be this: never make another person's attention the foundation of your self-worth. Instead, build a life so rich in purpose, discipline, and self-respect that your happiness no longer rises and falls with someone else's opinion. Focus on becoming the kind of person who keeps promises to yourself, protects your peace, and walks away from what repeatedly drains your spirit. If today's message resonated with you, don't let it remain just another inspiring video. Choose one small change today. Stop chasing one source of validation. Invest that energy back into yourself and watch how your life begins to transform. And if you found value in this journey, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful stories that inspire inner strength, emotional wisdom, and lasting confidence. Thank you for taking the time to watch until the end of the video. See you in the next videos.